Okay, welcome everybody to session 7. This is the next to the last session for the Sunday afternoon presentation of the conference. This session has 3 presentations. We're going to be talking about analyzing big data in Greek records. We're going to be talking about using DNA in Greek genealogy with Sam Williams, and we're going to introduce a new Greek genealogy guide with Alexander Carisi. So we're going to jump on in and get started. There's a lot to cover and a lot of fascinating information. We're going to start with Greg talking about analyzing big data in Greek records. Let me just give you just a little background about Greg. We've seen him and we know that he's the one who's sponsoring this conference along with Georgia Stryker-Kyleman. But let me just tell you quickly, Greg is the founder of Greek Ancestry. Now, 1 year ago this weekend, there was the launch of the Greek Ancestry website. And now, 1 year later, there are 700,000 name-indexed searchable records on the site. Greg, how did you ever do all this in just 1 year? It's truly, truly a miracle. You have little help. Well, help is good. So now that you have 700,000 records with thousands more coming on every month, you have a lot of data that you can analyze. And we have a slang term in the US, you can slice it and dice it, meaning you can take that data and do all kinds of things with it and learn so much. So I want to know what new tips and information have you learned by this massive data that you're accumulating? What can help us with our research? What kind of patterns are you finding as you collect these records from all over Greece? So tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how we're going to benefit from it.
Right. Thank you, Carol. So let me share my screen real quick. Great. Okay. Okay, so the idea behind this presentation is that as Carol said, in the past 1 year, thousands of records have been made available on Greek Ancestry, but also on MyHeritage. Before that, research was complicated, sometimes very hard, and the best we could hope for was to find records for our family, right? Just for ourselves. However, now with this massive influx of records, we can do many more things. We can put our family history into context. We can understand things better. We can learn about the records themselves, which is something that helps us enormously in our research. And we can also expand our research from our single families, to greater to a greater space. And we can work on the history of our village or of an entire area. On Friday, we had amazing presentations about village history projects. So this is enabled when lots of information becomes available. I'm going to give you 2 examples of what this big data, the statistics can help us with. So for example, in the summer, we used the information we gathered from the parish photo lists of Laconia, which we digitized at the metropolis of Sparta in June. So we took those records. Those records cover all of the jurisdiction of the metropolis, like 100 villages. They include 35.5 thousand people from 1912 to the 1930s, up to 1940. So, when I realized how big that collection was, I started thinking, what else can we learn from it, right? So, okay, I found my family records, okay, but then is there anything else? I had a question from early on when I started doing genealogy research. I was thinking, why cannot I find someone in records, an ancestor? Why can't I find him or her in records? Maybe he passed, but I couldn't tell if this assumed age of death was normal or not. So, in other words, knowing when someone was expected to die is really, really helpful in research. So here's what we did. We took the ages listed for all people in the parish photo list, 35.5 thousand people, and we analyzed the information. You can see a graph here at the top. If you go here, do you see this, like this spike above 60? 1,019 people were registered as being 60 years old. 897 people were registered as being 65 years old. And then moving forward, you see there is a clear decline, which is really sharp after the age of 65, the age of 70. In fact, only 35 people, less than 1 per 1,000, according to the lists, made it into their 90s. Topsy was talking before about people in Icaria living well into their 90s and even passing like the 100 border. But in Laconia, things were different, obviously, because between the 1910s and 1930s, only 35 people, only 35 men lived in their 90s. Now, we can learn even more things from this graph. For instance, if your ancestor was 60 years old in 1920, he had 33.5 chances to die by the age of 70. This is super helpful for research. Someone aged 70 had 68.8 chances to die by the age of 80. In this way, we can get a really good picture of what a Greek village looked like back then. How many old people lived in the village? How many young people were there? How old people were? So all sorts of things. And then we can also understand why someone is not in the records. Maybe he had passed. Now, this information, this big data, it also helps us, as I said in the beginning, learn more about the records themselves. So you would have, I'm sure you have already noticed here, there are this spikes for the age of 30, and then 35, and then 40, and then 45, then 50, 55, and so on. So obviously there's something wrong here because it doesn't make sense for, let's say, almost 1,300 people to have been registered as being 30 years old, but only 700 people to be registered as being 31 years old. It doesn't make sense. Obviously, someone who was 29 or 31 years old would likely be registered in the list as being 30 years old. So we're talking about rounded ages. The records give a good idea of how old someone was, but not always exactly how old. The age has been rounded. And the ages suitable for rounding were generally those close to numbers like 30, 40, 50, or 35, 45, 55. So when you see an age in record, listed in records, you should always keep in mind that this might be, not necessarily, but it might be approximate. Now, the second example, Greek Ancestry has indexed the male registers of the entire prefecture of Hanya. These records come from the archives of Hanya, the historical archive of Crete. They were digitized, but they were not name indexed. They were not name searchable. So we took this collection and we indexed it. It includes about 56,000 records. And here's what we did. We took all the first names appearing in the records and all the surnames. Now, because both the what's the word, like the registered person and his father were listed in the list, we have a double number of first names than surnames. So we have this database includes 113,000 first names and 56,000 surnames. And we created tables and figured out how common names were, both first names and surnames. Here on this table, you can see the top 10 first names in the prefecture of Hanya from the 1850s to 1910, and the top 10 surnames in the prefecture. Now, in this way, you can know how common your ancestor's first name was or how common your family name was. And why is this important? In this way, you can find out how big your family has been in the past. And this also, let's say, protects you sometimes. In many cases, we find records, but we are not 100% sure if, let's say, Georgios Papadakis, son of Ioannis, is our ancestor or not. We might think, okay, but maybe it's not him. It was a cousin. It was a distant relative, whatever. By knowing how frequent the surname was, we can be more, let's say, certain, more precise as to what the chances are that we have the right person or not. And we have made this list for all the names that show up in the Cretan, in the Haniot registers. So, for example, if your name doesn't show up here, you can just reach out to us and say, hey, my family from Hanya had this surname. Can you tell me how common it was? And yes, it's really easy for us to tell you, that we have 1,000 or 100 people listed under this surname. And we can also tell you, yeah, this surname, we find it 1,000 times, yes, but only in this village or only in the town of Hanya. And in this way, again, you can figure out how extensive the family was, where they lived, and all of that. Now, this sort of analysis is important for another reason. So far, with Carol, with Georgia, all of us stress the importance of knowing someone's original place of birth, their place of origin. We always tell people, do not start your research, do not start messing up with Greek records if you don't know exactly where the family came from. But listen to this. With such analytical tools and databases, we can locate which areas some surnames came from. So even if you don't know whether your family is from Arcadia or Messenia or any other area of Greece, when we build a database like this one, like with statistics and all that, we will be able sooner or later to just locate surnames throughout the whole country. So is your surname, I don't know, Kontos, okay, we will be able to know that the Kontos surname appears in this and this and this and that area of the country. And honestly, I think this really changes things in the way we do Greek genealogy research. Okay, this is what I wanted to bring up, Carol.
Mhm. That is fascinating, and I can't wait to see all the wonderful things that you're going to share with us as your database continues to grow, Greg. Congratulations on all that you've done, and yes, God bless you.